Hello, so I'll be doing a video on just little tips and tricks on digital art in general while using Clip Studio Paint, and little tips and tricks that are exclusive to Clip Studio Paint. Um, so a few things to note is that I'm using Clip Studio Paint EX, and I hope that I don't cover anything that is EX exclusive and that can be used on both versions, EX and Pro. I'm using the Mac version, and I'm also using the latest version. So if something's not showing up, you can either ask me or also make sure that you're using the latest version of the program. So usually, so one thing you want to do when you start is to go to your pen pressure settings. Now this will help set the program up to recognize the way that you handle tablet pressure. I know some people find it a little bit clunky at first when they start drawing and they don't use this. So what you want to do is just make, as many lines as you can so that the program can adjust itself to how firm or how soft you deal with your tablet pen, and it'll make the adjustments accordingly. Another thing when you do that is to adjust by multiple strokes instead of adjust by single stroke. So I already had that selected, and we're going to press OK, and it's adjusted itself there. So another thing here is that maybe you're working on something that's kind of big. Well, this isn't that big, but I'll zoom in here like that. And what you can do is basically have two of the same file open. So I'm going to go to Window, Canvas, New Window, and it's going to open a second instance of the same file. And a neat thing that Clip Studio Paint can do is that you can anchor your images wherever. So I can put it to the side there, or above, or even put it below right here. But the way I want to work right now is put it to the side. And we're going to go back to the other image we had. So you can have one image zoomed in while you draw, and that was an accident. And I'll choose like a blue or something. So while you draw here, it will show up here. And so you don't have to, either stretch out the navigator or try to rely on a tiny preview. And you can draw a straw here and see how it'll affect the entire drawing. And anything you do on this drawing as well will appear on this one. And when you press the floppy disk on either of these, it will save to the same file regardless. So I'm going to go ahead and close that, and I'm going to undo all this. And so since this is a scanned file, all these lines are kind of still attached to the background that they were on, which is, a white color instead of transparent. And so, if you want a color on it, most people would go to multiply and put it on top of that layer to go under the lines. But another method you could do, I'll just uncheck that, is you can select the layer that has the lines and the white, and you can go to Edit, Convert Brightness to Opacity, and it's going to suck all of the white out and convert it to transparent so that you can just go underneath. I'll make a layer here and drag it underneath the lines, and when I color, it will appear under the lines that it's left. And another thing that's interesting is if I go back to the lines that I pulled out, and I'll like make a really dark purple color here. if I go to edit, there is a setting here called change color of line to drawing. And if I click that, it will grab whatever color I have here and convert all the colors on the layer to that color. Oy. So the next thing I'm going to go over is corrective layers. So if I go to layer, new correction layer, so anything I do here will make a new layer. So for example, I want to do maybe posterization. That one looked good. So what these correction layers do is basically like editing, photo editing tools, but it won't affect your original image. Well, it will, but you can undo it. Since it will be its own layer here, you can turn it off or on, and it will basically only affect everything that it's above. So let's see. Okay. So another one I will go over is first I'm going to make the layer underneath the lines here white. And on this, since I'm going to make a layer above the white layer, I'm going to have the white one selected. And I'm going to make a quick selection here. I'm going to click these boxes because I want to add onto the selection I have. Okay, so I've got that there. So what we're going to do now is go to layer, new layer, and we want a new tone layer. And then we can do a screen tone fill. So I want maybe 85 lines, but I want the density to not be that much. Small density, 18%. And we can also change the angle a little. Like that. So when we drop that in, it's going to do two things for us. It's going to go ahead and drop screen tones. You can also have screen tones in this side panel here and drag and drop it into the image as well, but this is a little nicer to do. So it drops in the screen tones for you, but if the selection you made isn't exactly, what you like after you drop them in, what you can do is click on this little black box here. Between the layer and these dots is click this little black box, and everywhere that it's white is where the screen tones will lay. Oops, I had the wrong selection. You can grab any brush and draw where you want more screen tones to be. So where it's white is where screen tones will show, and where it's black is where they won't, but maybe overshot a bit. Well, you can take your eraser, as long as you have the mask mode set up here. If you erase it, you'll get, what you might have wanted. Now it won't work if you have the layer selected, because screen tones are kind of their own, I'll say vector layer in Clip Studio. So another thing you can do, I'll get rid of all this here, is this can be a little bit finicky, but it might be a little fun to mess with, is I'll get rid of all this here. I'll get rid of the screen tones, basically. Delete that and delete that. And I'm going to change the lines back to black. And then I'm going to merge with the white so that it's stuck on white again. And what I can do is go to layer, convert layer. I want to convert it to maybe a vector layer. And it's going to try and pull those lines out for me and determine the best way to do it just through its algorithms. So, we can set how big the lines can be or how thin they can be. And I'll put them maybe really between thin and thick. So this is kind of a thin one, I think. And the program can try to make corrections with any wobbly lines as well. And let's see. The threshold here is basically if it'll pick up these thin ones or if it will leave them out as kind of like a post-correction kind of deal. And the larger the threshold, the more it will leave those out, but the less the threshold, if I recall, it's been a while, but with my experience with Illustrator, I think the least it will include more. So if I press OK here, and then I send that out, so that's a bit messy, but I determined correctly that, the lower the threshold, the more it will include. So if I make another layer here, make it white, and do a fill, and we turn off the one that we merged earlier, this is the new vector layer, and it's tried its best to determine, what was on the paper. And it can come out kind of interesting, but it's just a fun little thing to mess with. Let's see. Alright, so another tool here are the layer properties, which can be found under Window, Layer Property, and I kind of hooked it up over here under my navigator. And what this will do is if, say, you want to, well, you can either use the change color of line to drawing and fill a color there, or by default it has like a light blue here, and you can change the whole layer color to a bluish, and it'll make it easier to kind of, ink on top of in that way. Or I'm going to pull these lines out again. What you can do with this little bar here is I can put a border around these lines. Well, the default color here is white, so I'm going to change it to this blue. Okay. Let's try something else. I'm going to make a new layer here. And so if I want to make a few lines, And when I turn this on and choose the blue again, it's going to make a little border, and I can adjust how thick or thin that appears. And I don't need to do it when I've already put something down. If I already have this border activated, I can just do that, and when the lines collide, the border automatically adds the gaps that are needed. And the fun thing about this is that if I make a new folder and drop this layer into the folder, I can also apply the border to the folder itself. So I can I'll have a bright pink one here. So another border added onto that. And then I can actually put this folder into another folder and also put that effect there. And so the possibilities are endless in that sense. Or instead of a border color, you can add like a fringe and make it glow a little. But another, I guess, neat tool is actually, I'm going to close all these and then make a new layer to work with here. Is I'll use like a watercolor brush here. And so with all these gradations here, I can click on this one that looks like the screen tones, and it will convert that for me into tones. And I can change how dense or not it is, like that. So I'm going to show how the vector layer works now with this sketch I've prepared. So I'm going to use this layer property where I change it to blue. And then what I'm going to do here is not press new layer, but I'm going to click the one that has a little cube in it on the corner and make a new vector layer. So any lines that I make on it are going to be vector lines. Another thing I want to note is that I'm going to be sloppy here. I'm going to make these lines overlap each other, and I'm going to leave it the way it is. And I'll show you why at the end after the time lapse. Okay, so now that we have the line art done, we want to utilize the vector layer itself. So the cool thing here is that now we can go to the eraser tool here and use the one called the vector eraser. Now the way this works, I'm going to draw a grid to show you. And go back to the eraser here. So if I have this one selected where it just has like a little blue line through the top of the cross, is that it'll just erase however. But if I select this one with just the top bit of it selected, it's going to erase whatever overlaps here. But if I select this one with two blue parts, is that it's going to erase the entire line that I select, like that. So I can combine that and get rid of, overlapping and whole lines. But what I'll be using is just the overlapping tool. And I can go in like that and erase the bits I don't need since I was so sloppy. Oops. Let's see. You can also kind of do one in one long sweep and just do one stroke to get rid of multiple sticking out lines. But it looks like I overshot just a bit too much. So what happens here is that if they don't overlap enough, the program can't determine, what to erase. So you can just go back in, take this line, and extend it like that. And when you go back to the eraser, you can kind of do that. And it'll try its best to determine where to erase again. It's not perfect, but it does the job pretty well. This is especially good for, extra large canvases. This is a pretty, it's average size, I would say. But it cleans up really well. Just like that. Just making sure I got everything. Alright. So the way this can work, if I want to start coloring this, is I'm going to make another layer here. I'm going to make two layers. And what I'm also going to do is this vector layer I've made, I'm going to click this little lighthouse to designate it as the reference layer. And for the first layer I've made here, I'm going to go to my pen again, and I'm going to press this little settings tool. Sorry about that. And what we want to do is go to anti-overflow. I already have all these checked, so when you deal with the settings of a brush, if you press these little eyeballs on and off, that means that the settings will show up out here and you don't have to keep going into the settings. So what I have checked is all this stuff for anti-overflow. And what I want to press is do not exceed line of reference. And we're going to put a bit of area scaling here as well so that it doesn't put a white halo between the colors and the lines. So because we have a reference layer already and we turned on anti-overflow, what we're going to do is I can just make this brush really big. But the way anti-overflow works is that it will stay inside the lines as long as the center of the brush is within the lines. And I'll show you that. So if I draw here and maybe use the pressure to, what would usually go outside the lines, it will detect the edges here and stay in. But if I move the center of the brush outside of the lines, it will still, follow within the lines, but it's not going to contain itself within the picture that I want. So I actually need 2 layers, silly me. So what we can also do, which is similar, is actually go to the paint bucket here. And there's a tool down here called multiple layers, and I check that, right? And I want to click the one that has a little lighthouse again. And that way, it will only stay within the layer that I have designated as the reference layer again. A little tip, as a digital medium is that, after you have this down, you can either make, a layer on top of it and press like this little, it looks like a little cauldron, but it's actually 2 layers, and you press this and it's going to make a clip layer, and anything I'm going to turn off the anti-overflow here. Even if I draw out here, it's going to stay within whatever is not transparent on the layer below it that it's clipped to. But if I turn this clip off, all the colors will go everywhere. Turn it back on and it will bind itself. Or you can take, the colors that you've made here and press this little lock with the transparency blocks, and you can do your shading that way, though this is not, good colors for shading right now. So a little fun thing that you can mess with as well, that will also use the anti-overflow. I'll turn that off, and then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take my lines and I'm going to make several squiggles and just put it through the body here of and it's going to be like various jumps between colors. I'm going to take this brown and close it off at the top so that it doesn't mess up too much. But there's a tool on the over here. It's going to look like kind of a stick making a smudge. You can take that and again set it to reference layer down here. And I have the color margin set all the way to 100 to do the gradation that I like. But if you take this and click and drag, it's gonna kind of merge all the fills that or it smudges all of them together. But it makes a gradation between each color line that you've done. It can be a bit finicky, but it is, fun to mess with. Um, let's see. Another fun tool you can use as well is the parallel ruler. Now, sometimes I lose it, but I think it's under the text. It is not under the text. So, the reason it's so hard to lose is that it's under, a tool that has a bunch of tools. So, it can be underneath where you would find the line tool, the rectangle tool, the circle tool. It's all here. Or, making comic panels or regular rulers and stuff like that. But actually, the parallel ruler is under the rulers here. And there's a symmetry ruler. And I can put, multiple lines, maybe 10 lines, right? And if I drop that in, you're going to have really pretty designs like that. And it's going to mirror on all of these individual lines. But I can just I just want 2 lines and do that. And when I draw, it will mirror on both sides like that. And if you feel like you don't really want to use that anymore, you can go up here and turn off the snap to special ruler, and you can just draw freely and erase freely. Another thing people have said, though, is that even if it's snapped to the special ruler, the eraser won't affect it. And what you have to do is, while you have the eraser selected, is, oh no. I came here to do a tutorial and I've forgotten what I was doing. If I go to the eraser, I still wanted to snap to the special ruler, and it is not doing that. So what you can do instead, because I've apparently forgotten and I deeply apologize for that, is you can go back to your brush that you drew with, and the fun little thing here is that there's a transparent box right here, and it will basically act like eraser because it will basically be like, instead of a color, just wherever you make a mark, make it transparent there. So instead I can use it like that. And the last fun extra thing that I want to talk about is the animation tool. So we can go back to new canvas here, and I'm actually just going to make it a much smaller canvas. So instead of cropping, I can just resize the canvas like that. And what we want to do is press new timeline right here. And then new folder right here. So basically, anything that's outside of a folder will just be a held image, and anything that's in a folder will be animated. Only things in folders will animate. So what I want to do in this folder is press this cell paper with a star in it, and it's going to make an animation frame for me. But what we can do is, instead of anything too complicated, is make like a hold, and I'll just draw a head here like that. And because I drew this on the layer that's outside of the folder, this will not change. It will stay the same the whole time. But here, another thing you want to turn on is this little double box, and it'll turn on onion skin, and you'll see what that does in just a moment. So since this is the first layer here, I'm just going to draw what would be here typically. And then when I'm ready to move on and do the next frame, I'll keep pressing this little one with the star in the corner, and it'll do that for me. So what the onion skin does, it allows me to see the frames that are before and after the frame that I'm working on, but only on the layer that I'm working on it from. So what you want to do though as well is go to let's see, show animation cells, onion skin settings, and this will let you see, you know, how many frames far back and how many frames forward you can see the onion skin. And I've messed with the opacity so that it's really, really light. So I can just keep doing this. And another tool you can do here is that you cannot edit it when you do this, but you know, if you want to go back and forth again, you can, instead of redrawing it, you can just go to right click on the panel and press maybe the 4, 3, 2, 1, like that. But what happens when you do that is, for example, if you draw on this one, it's going to affect this one because it's basically saying, you know, these are the layer labels, and when you go to these keyframes, it's going to refer to that layer. But these are the same. This is just two instances of the same layer. But if you want to copy, you know, a previous layer, oops, let me put those back, I guess. And then I'll go back to 1 here, and you can right click on the layer, selection from layer, create selection, and then you want to go here to 2 and press new keyframe. And then I'm going to take the brush and I can fill it in, and it's going to make a basic copy of what you had before, like that. But now you can go in and make like whatever changes you want because now it's on its own layer. See, so if I go from here to here, you can see the changes. So I'm going to take this and move it all the way down because if I keep that blue line all the way at the end, it's going to play the whole animation from the beginning all the way back there, and we don't need that. So we're just going to put it right here. And because it's such a small amount of frames, you're going to go to animation, settings of play. What's this? Nope, timeline, change frame rate, and I'm going to move it to about 8 frames per second. And if I press the beginning and press play, gonna do that for me. Unfortunately, it seems I forgot to make a fully closed eye drawing, but it gives you the basic idea. So thank you for watching, and I hope that helped. If you have any questions, feel free to leave any in the comments. Thank you.